After my uncle died in a car accident, my cousin suffered a great psychological shock and came to my house to recuperate. She fell in love with my boyfriend, and everyone told me to give him up for her. Even my boyfriend said, "Cynthia, she's already so pitiful, why are you quibbling with her?" Later, I also had a car accident. While I was being rescued, my cousin cried in my boyfriend's arms. If she dies, so many people will care, but no one cares about me when I'm alive. I died in the operating room, and my cousin took my guaranteed admission spot and married my boyfriend. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the time when my cousin had just come to my house. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. You wretch! It's not enough that you killed my dad, now you want to steal my boyfriend too. As soon as I opened my eyes, a great force came from in front of me. It was Delia pushing me against the wall. She was holding scissors, about to cut my face. I instinctively resisted, and Delia was pushed away. The scissors flew out of her hand, and she staggered back a few steps, falling on the stairs. Her hand was scratched, blood dripping down. Delia simply sat on the ground, covering her face and sobbing uncontrollably. The students around all stopped and looked over curiously. "Cynthia Burton, what are you doing?" The person rushing over was my boyfriend, Claude Dawson. He helped Delia up from the ground. "Are you okay?" Following behind Claude was my best friend Bonnie. Seeing Claude's behavior, she became furious. "Claude Dawson, are you blind?" Delia was the one who first took out scissors to cut Cynthia's face. "Whose boyfriend are you anyway?" "If Delia can't tell, can't you?" Perhaps Bonnie's voice was too loud. Delia seemed frightened and shrank into Claude's arms, crying even harder. Claude frowned. "Bonnie, you know Delia's situation. After her father's sudden death, she developed a serious mental illness. How can you still provoke her at this time? Don't you have any basic sympathy?" As if feeling protected, Delia timidly tugged on Claude's sleeve, stubbornly repeating, "You are my boyfriend." Claude patted Delia's head, saying in a soothing tone, Satisfied, Delia glared at me and said smugly, "If I see you talking to Claude again, I won't be so nice." Claude sighed. He gave me an apologetic look, then picked Delia up in his arms. "Your hand is injured. I'll take you to the hospital first." This scene was all too familiar. In my previous life, I also watched Claude and Delia leave like this. At that time, I was just like Bonnie is now, furious but helpless. After all, Delia was truly pitiful. My aunt passed away while giving birth to her, and she was raised by my uncle, who then died in a car accident during her senior year of high school. As a result, Delia suffered a great psychological shock and began to have intermittent episodes. To take care of her, my mom brought her to live with us. At first, I gave everything to Delia. If she wanted to stay in my room or wear my clothes, I agreed to it all without hesitation. Until one time, Claude came to visit our home. He was the most popular boy in our school and also the young master of the Dawson group. Delia fell in love with him at first sight. "Cynthia, can you let me have Claude?" I refused Delia, but after that, whenever Claude was mentioned, she would become somewhat deranged. She began to believe that Claude was her boyfriend, and that I was a homewrecker trying to steal her man. Whenever she saw Claude and me on a date, she would cry her eyes out and even cut herself with a small knife. Later, on a rainy night, Claude and I were out watching a movie when she called me frantically, saying she had been kidnapped. I rushed over in a panic and got into a car accident on the way. While being rescued, my soul seemed to float out of my body and hover outside the operating room. Delia was crying in Claude's arms. I was just joking, I didn't think she would take it seriously. If Cynthia dies, many people will remember her, but I'm alive and only suffering, no one ever cares about me. Claude couldn't help but hold her tight. Who says no one cares? You still have me. After I died, Delia's mental state seemed to suddenly improve quite a bit. She accepted my parents as her own, took my guaranteed college admission spot, and went to Q University with Claude. On the anniversary of my death, she burned paper offerings for me and my uncle. "Dad, Cynthia, thank you for your sacrifice. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even have gotten into a vocational college, let alone be where I am today. At that moment, my soul was struck with realization. Delia was never ill. It was all just an elaborate scheme. A clear female voice came from beside me. "Do you want to start over?" Without hesitation, I said, "Yes." So when I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day Delia transferred to our school. Seeing that Claude was about to embrace Delia and leave, I suddenly strode forward and said in a deep voice, "Claude Dawson, let's break up." Claude's expression changed instantly. He frowned and said, "Cynthia, don't be angry." "I'm serious," I said calmly. "If you want to take care of Delia, then take good care of her. We're over." After saying this, I turned and left, ignoring Claude desperately calling my name behind me. After school, I called Bonnie to meet at a coffee shop. "Does your dad know anyone in the traffic police department?" I asked. I wanted to investigate the truth behind my uncle's car accident. My uncle was an experienced truck driver, and that day everything seemed normal, yet he crashed into a bridge pier. After hearing my story, Bonnie got goosebumps. "You think his death might not be as simple as it seems?" I remained silent. My uncle was a good man, not very capable, but extremely proud. My family offered to help them financially multiple times, but he always politely refused. After his death, Delia was adopted by my family, moved into a spacious villa, and began living a life with chauffeurs and maids. Now it's all just speculation, but thinking back to Delia's expression when she was paying respects to her father in my previous life, I can't help but think the worst. Bonnie assured me she could handle it. Just as she left, my phone rang. It was Claude. "Cynthia, where are you? Let's talk." I didn't plan on meeting Claude, but he managed to find this coffee shop, knowing me so well. "Cynthia, don't be angry anymore," he said, sitting beside me with my favorite pistachio cream puffs in hand. "You know you're the only one I love." In my previous life, I would have softened at hearing such words. But now, I just smiled coldly. "You're holding Delia in your arms, loving me in your heart. Multitasking at its finest, Mr. Dawson." Claude got a bit angry. "I'm just pretending with Delia to keep her emotionally stable. She's your cousin. Don't you want to do something when you see her in such a state? If she's sick, she has doctors. Why do I need to do anything?" I waved my hand. "Enough, Claude. Breaking up is best for both of us. I've already called the hotel to cancel the engagement party decorations." Claude was stunned, looking at me in disbelief. "Are you serious?" He then glared at me angrily. "Cynthia Burton, an engagement is a very serious matter. There's no need to joke about this just because you're upset with me." I couldn't blame Claude for not believing me. After all, I had always loved him so much, wholeheartedly wanting to go to Q University with him, with all my future plans revolving around him. But now, I don't want that anymore. I'll say it one last time. I'm not joking, and I'm not upset. I calmly looked back at him. "We're breaking up. It's that simple." Claude growled. "I don't agree." Before he could finish, a figure rushed into the coffee shop. Delia grabbed the coffee from the table and splashed it on me with lightning speed. "You wretch!" she screamed. Then, before I could retaliate, she swayed and fell into Claude's arms. Claude held Delia with one hand and grabbed me with the other to prevent me from leaving, sweating profusely. Amidst the chaos, I looked towards the counter of the coffee shop. The owner secretly gave me an okay sign. A smile silently crept onto my face. The owner of this coffee shop is my friend, and I had earlier signaled him to turn on the cameras. Delia's entire outburst had been recorded. This was my backup plan. Prison or a mental hospital, I had to send her to one of them. The day's drama ended with Claude taking Delia to the hospital. I returned home alone to find no one there. Clearly, Mom and Dad had received a call and had also gone to the hospital to see Delia. I sat in the unlit living room, quietly contemplating for a while. My parents do love me, but they're also very strict with me, always holding me to the highest standards. When I was little and had disputes with other children, they would always tell me to apologize first. Not to mention this time, Delia appears to be the complete underdog in everyone's eyes. So whenever there's any conflict between Delia and me, they always tend to side with Delia on the surface. This time they went to the hospital. Delia must have played the victim again, probably throwing a lot of dirt on me. Sure enough, over an hour later, Mom and Dad returned home with Delia. Mom was supporting the frail Delia, while Dad's face was as cold as ice. "Cynthia, come here," Dad called me. I clearly saw that behind him, Delia was outwardly leaning weakly against Mom, but in reality, a barely noticeable smile crept onto her lips. "Did you upset Delia again?" Dad's tone carried anger. "You know very well that Delia is sick, yet you still embarrassed her in public. Cynthia, when did you become so lacking in empathy?" Look at that, Delia had twisted the truth again. It was clearly her who rushed in and poured coffee on me, but now it's turned into me embarrassing her. If this were my previous life, I would have desperately tried to defend myself, proving that I didn't do such a thing. But in this life, I know self-justification is useless. What's useful is going crazy along with Delia. If it's about faking illness, I can do it too. Silently lowering my head, I said in a pained voice, "I'm sorry, Dad. I know I've disappointed you." Then, I took out a thick envelope and emptied its contents. A diagnosis from a psychological counselor and a completed application for a leave of absence from school. My parents' expressions changed abruptly, and even Delia couldn't help but sit up straight. With reddened eyes, I helplessly pinched my arm. "I've been unable to control my emotions lately. I can't concentrate on studying at all. And I feel like I might commit suicide if this continues. You have limited energy, it's impossible to take care of both Delia and me at the same time. As the older sister, I should give way to her, so let Delia take the college entrance exam this year, and I'll take a year off school." As soon as I finished speaking, Mom was the first to become flustered. This won't do." Dad was a bit calmer than Mom. He pulled Mom into the bedroom. The two of them lowered their voices, but their conversation still came through from time to time. Mom's voice took on a crying tone. "It's all my fault. I was only thinking about how Delia needed care. So I brought her home, but I didn't think it would affect Cynthia too." Dad comforted her, "Don't blame yourself. What's important now is to find a suitable solution." In the living room, Delia glared at me hatefully. She picked up the psychological consultation diagnosis I had left on the table. "Cynthia, when did you ever go to a psychological consultation? You forged this, didn't you?" I curled my lips slightly and said softly, "You've never even been to a psychiatrist, you're all talk." "At least I have a forged proof." The next second, Mom and Dad pushed open the door, and I immediately put on a helpless expression. "Please, stop talking about me. I'm willing to give Claude and my parents to you. If you're still not satisfied, I'm willing to disappear from this world forever." "Cynthia! What are you saying?" Mom rushed over and firmly grasped my hand. "You absolutely must not think of doing anything drastic." Dad came to Delia and said gently, "It's like this, we've discussed it, and we have another house in the south of the city, closer to the school. Delia, why don't you move there first, and we'll hire a caregiver to look after you." Delia's eyes widened. "Uncle, are you abandoning me?" She immediately started to act out. "Uncle, please, you're my only family. Please don't abandon me." My parents tried to comfort her together, their tone extremely gentle, but their attitude absolutely firm. I sobbed quietly on the side, but inside I was laughing coldly. In my previous life, after I died in a car accident, my parents were devastated. At that time, Delia voluntarily offered to become their daughter and take care of them in their old age, and they, being deceived, agreed. But right now, I'm still alive, and people always favor their own flesh and blood. My parents couldn't possibly watch me be driven to depression and suicide by Delia. And so, Delia was sent away from my home. She went around school playing the victim, saying I had driven her out of the house. Classmates cursed me for being a vicious sister, treating a poor orphaned girl like that. I couldn't even be bothered to respond. The college entrance exam was the real deal, these rumors didn't matter at all. After all, once high school was over, most people would never see each other again. Claude also came to confront me. "Delia cried to me for half the night yesterday. Did you really have to treat her like that?" I kept my head down, working on analytic geometry, not even looking up. "Claude, we've already broken up." You don't seem to have any right to criticize me. I never agreed to break up, Claude said firmly. The engagement is between our two families. How can you just end it with one sentence? Now that's interesting. I put down my pen, looked up, and smiled mischievously. So you're saying you're still my boyfriend? Since you're still my boyfriend, can you explain why Delia was crying to you for half the night? A single man and woman together late at night, who do you think is more out of line between us? Claude was at a loss for words. I only feel sympathy for Delia. She's your cousin and my classmate. I smiled and said nothing. Actually, I had a recording on my phone. It was from when Claude was hanging out with his friends, recorded by one of them and sent to me. In the recording, Claude, perhaps having had a drink, said in a smug voice, "It's nothing new for a man to have two women at once." I sneered coldly. What era did he think this was, still trying to play the red and white roses game? But for now, I didn't want to continue arguing with Claude. Verbal disputes are useless. The more you argue with a scumbag, the deeper you get dragged in. What I needed to focus on were the tangible benefits. But Claude was like a chewed piece of gum, once stuck, impossible to shake off. The school organized a lecture by alumni from university, and the top 30 students in our grade were invited to attend. Claude happened to be sitting next to me. Before the meeting started, he stopped me, seemingly struggling to speak. "There's something I don't know how to say." "Then don't say it." I tried to move past him, but he blocked my way. He bit his lip, but still spoke up. "Can you give up your guaranteed admission spot for Delia?" "No." I barely lifted my eyelids as I tried to shake off Claude. Claude panicked and firmly grabbed my wrist, forcibly pulling me to one side of the hallway. "Cynthia, listen to me. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. Right now, you're the only one who can save Delia." Under my scrutinizing gaze, Claude stammered through the whole story. It turned out that Delia had caused trouble again. She had faked a suicide attempt in the bathtub, then called Claude. He had broken down the door just in time to save her before she lost consciousness. After this melodramatic scene straight out of an 80s romance novel, Delia tearfully told Claude that if she couldn't go to the same college as him, she would die. As everyone knew, both Claude and I had already secured spots at Q University. As for Delia's grades, she was about 400 points short of getting into Q University. "That's great, Claude Dawson." I nodded, "since Delia is so set on going to the same school as you. And you're so eager to fulfill her wish, why don't you?" I smiled at him under his expectant gaze. "Tutor her? Although there's only a month left before the college entrance exam, heaven will probably be moved by your kindness and create a miracle." I turned to leave, but Claude, exasperated, quickly stepped in front of me. "Cynthia Burton, do you even hear yourself? How can Delia take the exam normally in her current state? If she doesn't want to take the exam but still wants to go to Q University, then we should all stop studying and learn how to play the victim instead." I rolled my eyes. "Please, just move. I want to attend the lecture." I finally shook off Claude and strode forward. Behind me, he said ominously, "Cynthia Burton, don't think I don't know. Her father's death was your fault." This statement was so shocking that I couldn't help but stop in my tracks, turning back in disbelief. "Delia told me everything. That day, you said you wanted to eat free-range chicken soup. Her father had just returned from a trip but went out again to deliver the chicken to you. He was driving while fatigued, which led to the accident." Perhaps my expression was too grim as Claude softened his tone. "Of course, Cynthia, I know you didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. Delia's current state is partly your responsibility. You should make amends to her." I remained silent as Claude approached, attempting to embrace me. "Cynthia, I know you don't believe me, but I really only feel pity for Delia. She's your sister, and I see her as a sister too. But in my heart, you're the one I love." Before Claude could finish, a cold voice interrupted him. "Excuse me, you've been blocking this path for almost 10 minutes now. When are you going to move?" Claude and I both turned our heads. A girl in a white shirt stood not far away, her gold-rimmed glasses hanging on her chest. hands in her pockets, her expression slightly cold. I recognized her as one of the speakers for this lecture, an alumna from B University named Estelle. For some reason, the moment I heard her voice, I suddenly froze. When I was reborn, a voice had asked me, "Do you want to start over?" That voice was identical to Estelle's just now. "Buddy, this isn't right. The lady is clearly annoyed with you, yet you're still pestering her." Behind Estelle, a tall young man sauntered up. He had a face that made it difficult to pinpoint his exact age, combining the mature features of a man with the clear look of a youth. His name tag read, Alumni, Darren. In that instant, fragmented memories suddenly pieced together in my mind like a jigsaw puzzle. A strong intuition told me that I had met these two people before. Thanks to Estelle and Darren, Claude was unable to continue pestering me. As soon as the lecture ended, I immediately bypassed the crowd and approached Estelle. "Senior, can I have your contact information?" Estelle observed me for a long time, then smiled. "Aren't you already admitted to Q University?" "I'm from B University, you should go find seniors from Q University." I hesitated for a long time, but finally asked discreetly, "Have we met before?" As soon as I spoke, Estelle's expression changed. Darren, who had come up behind her, also had a slight change in his expression. "At school?" Estelle asked, seemingly calm. I shook my head bravely. "No, not at school." It was. With people coming and going nearby, I didn't dare to be too direct, so I hinted vaguely. "By a river, with red lotus flowers on the opposite bank. One of you was on a boat, the other at the bridge." Before I finished speaking, both Estelle and Darren's expressions had already become serious. "You actually remember." Estelle murmured softly, "This probably means you still have quite a few ordeals ahead." She tore off a piece of notepaper, wrote down a string of numbers and handed it to me. "Here, this is my contact information." After Estelle and Darren left, I added that account. The ID was strange. It was called Time Reverser. Before I had a chance to say hello, an emoji was thrown over, followed by a few lines that gave me goosebumps. "Whether a reborn person can survive depends on fate. Your situation is very precarious now, you might die again if you're not careful. If there's danger, send a message to this number." I held my phone, my fingertips trembling slightly. I had already avoided all the crucial points from my previous life. Could it be that Delia has some new way to kill me? I locked myself in my room, pondering seriously for the entire night, and then decided to change my strategy appropriately. So, when Claude called me again, I didn't hang up as usual, but answered it instead. Claude was a bit surprised, then let out a long sigh of relief. "Cynthia, you've finally stopped being mad at me." I tried hard to resist the urge to roll my eyes and calmly said, "What's the matter?" "Friday is my birthday party," Claude said. "All our classmates will be there." "Cynthia, you'll come to celebrate with me, right?" "All our classmates will be there." I sneered silently and asked, "Will Delia be there too?" Claude's throat tightened. If you don't want." "No, that's not what I meant. I'll be there to celebrate your birthday." After hanging up the phone, I smiled faintly. Delia is quite clever. When it's time for college entrance exams, she has an episode, but when it's time for a party, she's immediately fine. But it doesn't matter. I wanted to find an opportunity to observe her movements anyway. So on Friday night, I arrived at Claude's birthday party on time. The party was held in a private room at a club. Claude was undoubtedly the star of the show, surrounded by people in the center. And Delia stood beside him. It was clear she had dressed up carefully, with light makeup and wearing a Chanel suit. I narrowed my eyes slightly. That suit was mine. I had originally planned to wear this suit today, but found it wasn't in my closet. I asked the housekeeper, who said she hadn't seen it, so I had to choose something else at the last minute. I didn't expect to see it on Delia. The Dawson family is a prominent family, and Claude's birthday party had a business networking aspect to it. From time to time, people from the business world would come to toast this future young boss. After toasting, they would look at Delia standing beside Claude, and Delia would exchange pleasantries with them, smiling. "I've long heard that Miss Burton is very outstanding. Seeing you today, the reputation is well deserved." Our company has always been interested in cooperating with Mr. Burton. If possible, we hope Miss Burton could put in a good word for us. This is a gift I prepared for Mrs. Burton." Delia smiled and said she would pass on the messages and gifts. But before she could take the gift box, a hand reached out from the side and snatched it first. This hand was, of course, mine. Taking the gift box, I smiled and nodded to the gift giver. "My mother loves this brand of face cream. Let me thank you on her behalf." The guests were stunned, looking me up and down, then hesitantly asked, "You are Cynthia Burton?" I extended my hand gracefully to shake hands and greet them. The guests were confused. "Then who is this young lady?" Everyone's gaze fell on Delia. Obviously, except for our schoolmates, everyone else had mistaken Delia for me. After all, I'm the one engaged to Claude, and I should be the one standing beside Claude at his birthday party today. Delia had clearly usurped my place. Before Delia could introduce herself, I jumped in. "Sir, you came to celebrate Claude's birthday and wanted to send a gift to the Burton family through me. Now that you've accomplished both, why bother about who anyone else is?" After I said this, Delia's face immediately turned pale. The guest was also perceptive. After all, he needed something from my family, so he immediately agreed with me. "Miss Burton is right. I'm so sorry for the mistaken identity earlier. Miss Burton's eloquence is so clear and sharp, truly befitting a young lady from a good family." From the corner of my eye, I saw Delia was so angry her eyes turned red. She turned away and ran out the door. That look was really pitiful. I saw Claude's expression turn sympathetic, and he was about to follow her. I grabbed him. "Fiancé, where are you going?" Claude angrily removed my hand. "Cynthia, do you have to be like this? Delia is your family too. You weren't here yet, so she was just helping to receive some gifts. Why did you have to be so sarcastic to her in front of so many strangers?" I sneered. "Right, helping me receive gifts, and then is she going to stand beside you in my place? Help you cut the cake for me, and maybe even marry you for me?" Claude frowned deeply. "Cynthia, I always thought you were a generous and graceful girl. How did you become like this?" With that, he left me and went after Delia alone. Everyone looked at me. They all saw that the Dawson family's young master had just left his fiancée to chase after Delia. Delia, she must be quite pleased with herself, right? It's fine, let her be smug for a few days. After all, I've already grasped the clues I wanted to know just now. That night, I received a text message from Delia. It contained a photo of Claude lying on a bed, half undressed, with his eyes slightly closed. "He's with you, but the one he truly loves is me. Cynthia Burton, you've still lost." I looked at my phone and let out a scornful laugh. Do you know how to truly destroy someone's state of mind? It's by kicking them down from the clouds when they think they're just one step away from success. So I opened my social media account and posted a friend circle update visible only to Claude. The content was a large bouquet of roses, with the caption, "Thank you for the flowers, I love them." After posting this update, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb mode and went straight to sleep. The next day was a weekend. When I woke up, there were more than a dozen missed calls on my phone, all from Claude. Opening my phone, Claude had already sent several screens worth of messages. "Cynthia, who sent you those flowers? You're my fiancé, yet you're being ambiguous with other men outside. What would your parents think if they knew? How ridiculous." Claude seemed to always lack the ability for self-reflection, strict with others but lenient with himself. In this aspect, he and Delia were truly a good match. But now, he had finally felt the sting. This was my strategy no matter how many times I told Claude to cancel the engagement. He would only think I was throwing a tantrum. But when I might possibly fall in love with someone else, he would truly panic. When you're about to lose something, that thing suddenly becomes exceptionally precious. Sure enough, after these few emotional outbursts, Claude quickly began to try to make amends. I admit I was wrong to leave you at the birthday party. But there were reasons, you should understand me. Cynthia, you won't find anyone who treats you better than I do." I didn't reply to these messages, intentionally creating more sense of crisis for Claude. That evening, Claude waited outside my house with roses. He even repeatedly questioned my housekeeper. Has any other man come to see Cynthia recently? I waited until the perfect moment before finally letting him in. He had waited outside for over 2 hours. Usually, he would have left in a huff long ago, but this time, there wasn't a trace of impatience on his face. He even seemed a bit relieved that I finally let him in. You still can't let go of me, right? He handed the bouquet of roses to me. An endless coldness welled up in my heart, but a smile hung on my lips, of course. The joy of regaining what was lost filled Claude's heart. And he began to repeatedly confirm the various procedures of the engagement ceremony with me. At the same time, to counter that love rival, Claude forced me to take a photo of the roses he gave me, as well as a photo of the rings on both our hands, compelling me to post another friend circle update. I acted as if I was very reluctant. Oh, everyone will naturally know at the engagement ceremony. The more reluctant I appeared, the more Claude insisted. Not everyone will attend the engagement ceremony, you must post this update. And so, seemingly forced by Claude, I posted this official announcement in my friend circle. Very good, everything was going according to my expectations. Dear Delia, how do you feel seeing this friend circle update? If you want to take action, please do so quickly. After all, the plan I've been weaving for so long is about to close its net. That night, after Claude left, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Estelle. These days I often met her for coffee, and we had become familiar friends. When she answered the phone, she seemed about to go to sleep, her voice lazy. What is it? Nothing, just felt I should tell you since I stole your picture. Yes, the picture I used to post in the friend circle for Claude to see. The roses in it were sent by Estelle's boyfriend Darren. I was eating out with Estelle at the time. Darren had somehow offended Estelle. And he was out of town and couldn't apologize in person, so he ordered a bouquet of flowers to express his apology. After hearing the whole story, Estelle was almost dying of laughter at Claude's various behaviors. But then she became serious. You're provoking Delia like this, she might take drastic measures to retaliate against you. Are you prepared? It's no wonder Estelle was worried. According to her, those who are reborn defy the will of heaven, so they're easily not favored by good luck. But I just smiled, of course. After ending the conversation with Estelle, I made another call to my best friend Bonnie. The thing I asked you to do early this morning, how's it progressing? Half an hour later, I hung up the phone with Bonnie. I raised my hand and opened Delia's chat window, looking at her profile picture. In this selfie, Delia looked so fragile, innocent, pure, and lovable. But no one could imagine what kind of demon was hidden beneath this facade. I had many ways to make this demon die silently. But that's not enough. I want to expose her in broad daylight for everyone to see, then let her vanish into thin air, never to be reborn again. The following days seemed peaceful and beautiful. The details of my engagement to Claude were finalized one by one. The guest list was drawn up, and invitations were sent out. Since the Dawson family had a company promotional task recently, they even arranged a live broadcast for the engagement party, leveraging the buzz of the Burton-Dawson union to promote their company's latest product. Theoretically speaking, the Dawson family using our marriage to advertise for their company was quite unethical. My parents were unhappy about this, but I gently persuaded them. The live broadcast will allow more people to witness this engagement ceremony, which is a good thing. Indeed, the more viewers, the happier I would be. Soon, the day of the engagement party arrived. 3 hours before the ceremony was due to start. I had finished my makeup and was preparing to change into my gown before the driver picked me up to go to the hall. I asked the housekeeper, "Where's the gown?" The housekeeper handed me a glass of water. "It's downstairs." "I'll go get it now." "Miss, please have some water first." 10 minutes later, the housekeeper opened the door, and the room was eerily quiet. I was lying on the floor, eyes tightly shut, with a fallen glass beside my hand. Half of the water had been drunk, the other half spilled on the floor. The housekeeper approached, tried to shake me, and called my name. I showed no response, obviously in a deep coma. The housekeeper let out a long sigh, took out her phone, and sent a text message. Moments later, the bedroom door was pushed open again, and the person who entered was Delia. She kicked me lightly with the tip of her shoe and said coldly, "Cynthia Burton, you've finally met your day." Then, Delia took out an envelope full of money from her bag and handed it to the housekeeper. "Leave immediately. No matter who asks you later, you say you know nothing." The housekeeper was a bit nervous. "Miss Delia, what are you going to do?" "It's none of your business," Delia said coldly. The housekeeper was still uneasy. "Please don't do anything too extreme, or I'll be implicated too. Can you stop talking nonsense?" Delia snapped, "Your son is waiting for you at the hospital." The housekeeper dared not say anything more and hurriedly left with the money. Only Delia and I were left in the room. She calmly removed my jewelry and put it on herself. Then went to the dressing room and found the gown I had prepared for the engagement. "Cynthia, you know what? I've always been very jealous of you. We're cousins, yet you live in a big villa while I live in a tenement. You're about to marry into a wealthy family, everyone calls you Mrs. Dawson, and me? I only have a bunch of thugs around me. It's not fair." Delia spoke while leisurely changing into the clothes. After changing, she waited for a moment, then the roar of motorcycles sounded from below, and a group of men who looked like thugs appeared downstairs. Delia opened the door for them and gave brief instructions. "Follow the plan. Strip her clothes, take photos, and when I send you a message, you send the photos to me." Delia left. Several tall men surrounded me. After waiting for about 10 minutes, probably thinking it was time, the lead thug lit a cigarette and then pointed at me, "Strip her naked." Immediately, one of the men came to my side. However, the moment he approached me, I suddenly opened my eyes wide. I kicked him hard in the groin and quickly retreated amidst his agonizing screams. The other men immediately realized something was wrong. But before they could surround me, two figures emerged from behind the screen in my room. "I like the Burton family's interior design," Darren remarked. "How about we decorate our home like this when we get married?" Estelle snorted coldly, "Who said I'm marrying you?" I was speechless. "Can you two help me resolve this crisis before flirting?" Before I finished speaking, Darren had already made his move. He swiftly flashed in front of one of the men, grabbing him by the collar. The man roared, "Where did this little brat come from?" Darren narrowed his eyes, clearly a bit displeased. "Disrespecting your elders, I don't like that." With that, he single-handedly lifted the man and smashed him into a nearby cabinet. The other two men exchanged glances, pulled out their switchblades, and charged at Darren from both sides. Darren sighed. Fighting in ancient times was more interesting. Modern youngsters have no martial arts skills at all. As he spoke, he disarmed both men barehanded. He kicked one into the bathroom and threw the other out of the second-floor window. The remaining thug leader was terrified. Instinctively, he knew he couldn't fight Darren. This young man's skills were clearly inhuman. So he set his sights on Estelle, who was standing not far away. Estelle had the typical look of a studious good girl, white shirt, white skirt, appearing fragile like a model student. Darren's voice immediately changed, "Don't touch her." It was too late. The thug leader had already lunged at Estelle, his sharp switchblade about to be pressed against her throat. Estelle calmly glanced at the thug, and in the next second, this model student raised what she was holding in her hand. A brick. She smashed it directly onto the thug's head. "I told you not to touch her." Darren stood aside, hands in his pockets, sighing helplessly. "She doesn't know her own strength." The thug collapsed to the ground, bleeding from 7 orifices. Estelle took out his phone and handed it to me. "Everything's pretty much as you expected." I smiled. Just as Estelle said, everything was part of my plan. As early as Claude's birthday party, I had already suspected that my family's housekeeper had been bought by Delia. The reason was simple. The Chanel outfit Delia wore that day, apart from me, only the housekeeper knew where it was kept. So I secretly observed the housekeeper afterward and indeed found that she was privately contacting Delia. After confirming this suspicion, I became extremely cautious of everything the housekeeper said and did. I wouldn't actually consume any food or drink she gave me. I also secretly got hold of her phone when she wasn't paying attention. Sure enough, under my constant provocation, Delia had decided to make her move on me today. So I contacted Estelle and Darren in advance, asking them to come and hide in my house. This phone should be the one you used to contact Delia, right? I said to the thug leader. He lay on the ground, pinned down by Darren, looking up at me with angry eyes, but saying nothing. Delia asked you to take nude photos of me and send them to her, so she could expose them at the engagement ceremony. Am I right? The thug leader still remained silent. There's no point in your stubborn resistance now. Breaking and entering, drugging me, attempted bodily harm, all this evidence is conclusive. If you don't want to go to jail, then do as I say. I held the phone in front of the thug leader's face, unlocked the phone. The thug leader turned his head away, ignoring me. Fingerprint should work too. Darren tried to grab the thug leader's hand. However, the thug did something unexpected. He put his thumb in his mouth and bit it hard, drawing blood. In short, he wouldn't give up the password, and he had also destroyed the fingerprint that could unlock the phone. Don't even think about impersonating me to contact Delia, he shouted, his voice filled with both viciousness and pride. I looked down at him thoughtfully. After a moment, I smiled slightly, so that's how it is. You weren't bought, you genuinely like her. The thug leader, his true feelings exposed, turned his head away from me. I laughed. So that's how it was. These thugs were all quite young. In their eyes, Delia must be like a pure, unblemished jasmine flower. Even if this jasmine flower asked them to do terrible things, they must believe she had been wronged first, that she had no choice. If that's the case, then this would be easy to handle. Taking out my phone, I played the recording I had made earlier. Delia's voice rang out clearly. You're about to marry into a wealthy family. Everyone will call you Mrs. Dawson, but what about me? I'm surrounded by a bunch of small-time thugs. If my future is to marry such low-quality men, I might as well die. The voice was cold and heartless, but it was undeniably Delia's. The thug leader's body suddenly jolted. He raised his head and stared intently at my phone, his eyes bloodshot. Do you understand now? You like her so much, but she has never thought highly of you. You're nothing but a stepping stone for her to use. Once she uses you to get close to the Dawson family's young master, she'll discard you. Now, think again. Do you want to cooperate with me? Delia stood in the banquet hall, looking at the guests dressed in their finery. She swallowed nervously, feeling an inexplicable tension rising within her. She took out her phone and sent a message to Byron. Is the video ready? Send it over. Soon, a file was sent to her. Delia opened it but found she couldn't play it smoothly. What's going on? I can't open it. Byron's reply came quickly. It won't open on the phone, but weren't you planning to connect it to the big screen? It will play on the big screen. A hint of unease rose in Delia's heart. But she quickly suppressed this worry. Byron was the leader of this group of small-time gangsters and also her biggest admirer. She had always promised Byron that once she scammed money from these rich people, she would marry him, so Byron did everything she said. If Byron said there was no problem, then there was no problem. So Delia silently approached the control center. At this moment, the big screen was playing some old photos of Claude and Cynthia. There was no one by the computer controlling the display, so Delia sat down and imported the video from her phone. Soon, all the guests would see Cynthia's compromising video. And since this engagement party was being live-streamed, countless people would witness this moment. The Dawson family, being so concerned about their reputation, would never allow Cynthia to join their family after this. Delia imported the video and forcefully pressed the play button. In the center of the hall, everyone turned their heads, attracted by the video that suddenly started playing on the big screen. Delia, with a crazy smile, also looked towards the big screen. The next second, her smile froze on her face. The scene in the video was a coffee shop. Claude and Cynthia were originally saying something when suddenly a girl with disheveled hair rushed in. She threw a cup of coffee on Cynthia, then fell into Claude's arms. Claude tried to protect this girl and even started arguing with Cynthia. The customers were already buzzing with discussions. My goodness, what's going on? Who is this woman? She looks mentally unstable. Why is Claude protecting her? Could this girl be the other woman? Soon, some customers noticed Delia sitting by the computer. Ah, isn't that the girl from the video? Yes, it's her. What does this mean? She came here to play this kind of video. Is she trying to crash the wedding? Before Delia could leave, Claude rushed up and grabbed her. Delia, what are you doing? Claude shouted in a low voice. Did you come here on purpose to ruin my engagement party? Delia's lips trembled. Impossible, the video that was supposed to play was the one Byron sent. It wasn't me, let me explain. Delia didn't know what to do, so she hastily picked up her phone. This video was sent to me by someone else. Perhaps too panicked to find a scapegoat, or perhaps wanting to ask what was going on. Anyway, Delia made a call to Byron. A familiar ringtone sounded from behind. Delia turned around abruptly. I stood not far behind her in an evening gown, waving something in my hand. It was Byron's phone. The next second, I walked onto the stage and took the microphone. Hello everyone, thank you all for coming to my engagement party. I believe you've just seen the video my cousin Delia played. Obviously, this relationship between three people is a bit too crowded, making me very hesitant about whether to go through with this engagement. Claude shouted, Cynthia, what are you doing? How many times have I told you, I just pity Delia? I smiled slightly. Oh? Well then, I have another video I'd like to play. I connected my own phone to the big screen. Then, heavy breathing echoed throughout the hall. In the frame, Delia sat on a hospital bed, looking up at Claude with tears glistening in her eyes. Please, can you give me a little redemption? Claude didn't speak. He closed his eyes, and Delia leaned in, kissing his lips. As if some boundary had suddenly been broken, Claude abruptly embraced Delia, deepening the kiss. In the video, the urgent and heavy breathing of the two could be clearly heard. When it finished playing, the hall was as silent as a graveyard. Claude's face turned pale. Delia has a mental illness, I was just cooperating with her treatment. Before he could finish, Delia jumped up. No. I don't. Delia's strategy was very clear. She was just pretending to be ill at my home, surviving on others' sympathy. But today, in front of so many people, especially with a live broadcast, she absolutely couldn't admit to having a mental illness. Otherwise, not only would the Dawson family never allow Claude to marry a mentally ill wife, but it would also affect her future studies and job prospects. Delia frantically pulled out her diagnosis from her bag. Claude, look, everything about me is normal. That's great. Someone interrupted her. Delia looked up in shock, staring at me. I held the microphone, smiling calmly, and repeated, that's great. I'm very glad you're completely normal. Otherwise I'd really be afraid you'd use mental illness as an excuse to escape criminal responsibility. The next second, as if to confirm my words, the police burst through the doors. 2 female officers came forward, flanking Delia on either side, and took her away. In the corner, my parents, who were already quite shocked, were utterly stunned after seeing the scene. Cynthia, what's going on? I looked to the side, where Bonnie, who had come in with the police, walked up to me. Cynthia contacted me several months ago, suspecting that Delia's father's death wasn't straightforward. My father did some investigating and indeed found many suspicious points. For example, Delia's father was clearly an experienced driver, but that day he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, causing him to crash through the windshield and fall into the river when he hit the bridge pier. And Delia didn't report to the police during the 48 hours her father was missing, making it very difficult to perform an autopsy when Delia's father was found. But through subsequent investigation, we still uncovered many clues. We found that there were traces of hallucinogenic drugs in the thermos in Delia's father's car. And Delia had online purchase records of this drug a few months before her father's accident. Mom's legs went weak, fortunately Dad supported her. The one we adopted and brought home. Yes, is a demon, I said softly. Uncle repeatedly refused our family's financial aid, living a frugal life with Delia. He thought he was teaching Delia to live a self-respecting and independent life, not knowing that Delia had long seen him as a stumbling block. Claude, who had been listening nearby, turned pale. He walked up, trembling. Cynthia, I was wrong before, I was too kind. I didn't look at him, just said coldly, Claude Dawson, you were never wrong about people. You're not kind either, you're lustful, greedy, stupid, and without principles. I turned to leave with my parents and Bonnie, never looking back. Don't come looking for me again, you're not worthy of me. Later, the court's verdict on Delia's patricide case caused a huge stir. The Dawson family's reputation was ruined in that live broadcast, and Claude, once the promising heir to the Dawson Group, became a despised scoundrel and a laughingstock. The Dawson family's business plummeted, and Claude's mental state gradually deteriorated. Eventually, his parents took him and left the city. I progressed smoothly in my subsequent studies, but the only strange thing was that I never saw Estelle or Darren again. I sent messages to the account named Time Reverser. But Estelle rarely replied, only occasionally sending me a voice message. We have new work. In fact, I had a vague idea of what their work was. After all, Estelle had once added me and Darren to a small group chat. And I discovered that Darren's ID was Soul Chaser. The name of our 3-person group chat was Work Group 18. I guess I was their 18th client. But what I didn't understand was that they provided me with so much help, yet they didn't charge me a penny. What exactly was their work compensation? The following spring, many of my questions were finally answered. Estelle sent me a text message. It contained only 4 words. Want to eat barbecue? Large slices of fatty beef sprinkled with green onions sizzled on the copper plate, releasing the aroma of melting fat. Around it were garlic-rubbed mushrooms, arranged in small bowl-like circles around the stove, already releasing juices and making bubbling sounds. Estelle picked up a piece of kimchi and chewed it. Finally finished with work, didn't even get a break during Spring Festival. Across from her, Darren was using scissors to cut open a cheese-filled lava steak. You've worked hard, honey. Eat more meat. Estelle rolled her eyes. Who's your honey? Get lost. She picked up some grilled fatty beef and put it on my plate. About us too, tell me what you know. I kept my head down, focusing on eating and pretending to be clueless. Huh? What? About you too? I know you're from B University, but I don't think Darren ever mentioned which school he's from. Estelle waved her hand. No need to pretend, Junior. I know you're smart. Just tell me what you know. Since she put it that way, I couldn't keep pretending to be clueless. Senior Darren is the soul chaser, his ability should be sealing souls. You're the time reverser, your ability is to reverse time. I was able to be reborn, probably because you two saved me. Estelle chewed on the fatty beef without saying anything. Her silence was essentially confirmation. I should have already died. That river with red lotuses blooming on the other shore was the river Styx. One of you was at the bridge, the other on the boat. Senior Darren was at the bridge, responsible for leading souls back from crossing. Senior Estelle, you were on the boat, taking that soul onto the boat and then sailing upstream. Estelle silently listened to me finish, then took a sip of cola. Everything you said is correct, but there's one issue. For the souls we've saved, we quietly provide help to ensure they can survive after being reborn. But in theory, these souls shouldn't be able to recognize us. After returning to the world of the living, the memories from the river Styx should be automatically erased. Both of them stared at me intently. So, why do you remember? How would I know? They both blinked at me unwaveringly. No, really, I'm not pretending this time. I raised both hands in surrender. I'm just an ordinary person who had a savior complex in my past life and still gets bullied in this one. Please don't ask me about your godly affairs, okay? Estelle glanced at Darren. She doesn't seem to be lying. Darren, she really doesn't know. All right, it's not important anyway. Estelle waved her hand. In short, we saved you, and most importantly, I still have these memories, I said. No. Estelle shook her head. Most importantly, you're still rich. I've decided to start a company. The underworld won't approve the budget, so I'm planning to find a financial backer in the human world. Estelle said, you seem very suitable. You two keep eating, I'm leaving. Cynthia Burton left. Darren was grilling meat while leisurely teasing Estelle. Well, you failed to convince her. Estelle calmly replied, don't worry, she'll be back. Those bound by fate will always return to the cycle of cause and effect. Sure enough, 3 minutes later, Cynthia lifted the curtain and sat back down. I didn't say I've agreed to join you, she said with a stern face. I just want to know what your business is and if I can get a return on my investment. 1 month later. In a small alley, Cynthia looked at the tiny shop with great disdain. A tacky sign was placed at the entrance, which read Wishing Shop, $10 one wish. I must be crazy, Cynthia muttered. I can't believe I invested in something like this. Estelle stood beside her and said kindly, it's okay, that small investment is just pocket change for you. What do you mean pocket change? Cynthia exclaimed in frustration. Are you saying that for just $10, you'll help fulfill a customer's wish? Is the power of you time reverser and soul chaser really that cheap? What are you talking about? Estelle said, puzzled. $10 is the price for making a wish, meaning customers can write their wish on a piece of paper and give it to me. As for fulfilling the wish, that's a separate price. By the way, let me introduce, I'm the shop manager, Darren is the assistant manager. Cynthia sneered, just the two of you, huh? You don't even have an employee. Estelle pointed at Cynthia, you, shop assistant. Wait, explain yourself. Aren't I the investor? How did I become a shop assistant? Estelle. Don't think that just because you're my senior, I won't dare to. I'm leaving. I'll write off this investment as a loss. The usually commanding Miss Burton was helpless against Estelle and angrily turned to leave. But just as she stepped out of the shop, she bumped into a pale-faced girl. Excuse me, is this where I can make a wish? The girl asked timidly. Cynthia was stunned for a second, then put on a warm smile. That's right, please come in. Oh no, she really became a shop assistant. After the girl went in, Cynthia stood outside the shop, wiping sweat from her forehead in frustration. However, working for these supernatural beings and witnessing the joys and sorrows of human life doesn't sound too bad. After all, the summer vacation is still long. It's time to welcome new stories.